Okay, thank you for having me. And somebody do let me know if I'm speaking too fast or if you can't understand me. I'm very sorry that my Danish is not very good at all. I don't understand very much. Otherwise, I would try to speak to you in Danish. But anyway, I'm very glad to be with you. I'm very sorry that I wasn't able to actually come over to be there physically. As Lena said, we've had a very, very busy few months over here in Britain. And I just wanted to say something at the beginning about the importance of international solidarity. We obviously work together as part of the World Against Racism and Fascism Network. We've organised coordinated demonstrations over several years now in March. And I think that that's been a very, very important initiative for all of our organisations because the international picture, we're facing many of the same attacks and challenges. Of course, we know that Donald Trump has been gone a while now, but Trumpism and the lasting legacy of what Donald Trump brought together for the international far right is still very much, I think, a part of the picture. And across Europe, more widely across the world, we have seen the ongoing threat from far right or fascist forces. Yeah, of course, people will have followed what happened in the French elections recently. And this might seem like a different topic from what we're talking about the Stop Rwanda campaign, but actually I think they're very much interlinked because if you look at the ground that the far right and the fascists are seeking to grow, both in France or, everywhere, it's very much the same ground that governments are using to whip up racism towards refugees and migrants, to scapegoat and to try to divert the blame for the crisis onto demonising refugees and migrants. And I think this is what we're seeing with policies like the Rwanda policy. So yes, I mean, for us in Britain here, we're facing a very intense racist backlash from, I was going to say, a cabinet that has that we've faced since the Black Lives Matter movement. But actually, you might have noticed that our government has been such a mess over a lot of issues that we actually have a new Prime Minister, which happened to come in on the same day as our Stop Rwanda protests. So we've just seen Boris Johnson and Priti Patel, who were very much the kind of the politicians who spearheaded the Rwanda policy and have very much fought to push it through. They are now no longer in office. So we're glad that they're gone and that they went on the same day as our mass protests. But we know that the government that we have now, we know that Liz Truss has just become the Prime Minister in Britain, as well as Suella Braverman, who's just become the Home Secretary, want to continue with the Rwanda policy. They not only want to continue with it and defend it, but they also want to extend it. So they've talked about extending the policy of offshore detention to other countries that they're looking into. So we know we face a very nasty racist government, even though the shift has changed and we've got some new people in. So I wanted to start just before we had the Rwanda policy introduced earlier this year. We were already facing a major attack on refugee and migrant rights, which was the Nationality and Borders Act. It's known widely as the Anti-Refugee Act, and it's something that really creates a two-tier system of deserving and undeserving people who are seeking for asylum, based on the concept of largely imaginary legal routes. It's a fundamental historic attack. So the Refugee Council, which is a big organisation in this country, pointed out that, under international law, as of the 1951 convention, everybody had the human right to apply for asylum in any country that had signed that convention and to remain there until the authorities had assessed their claim. And it also recognised that people fleeing persecution might have had to use irregular means in order to escape and claim asylum in another country, and and recognise that there is no legal way to travel to the UK specifically for the purpose of seeking asylum. So, what the government is trying to do is to say to people living in Britain. We've got this huge problem with refugees. They're all coming here illegally. We're going to make it possible for people to come only legally, and everybody else will be treated as a criminal. What they don't say is that there actually are not any legal routes. So this is basically ruling out a human right of seeking asylum for the vast majority of refugees.
You're speaking a little bit too fast.
Okay, thank you for telling me. I will slow down. Yes, sorry. So the Nationality and Borders Act that we are facing is something that unpicks this fundamental principle of the human right to asylum, which was enshrined in the wake of the Holocaust, in the Second World War. Now what we're facing is a government that, for the first time is really seeking to actually completely remove that right. So it is a major attack. And, given that less than 1% of the world's refugees are able to follow legal migration routes, we can see what this is going to mean. So in Britain, there's been a lot of campaigning over this issue since this government has brought in this policy. Another part of that policy is that it would actually strip the citizenship rights of around 6 million people. So if you're a second generation migrant, you could still be detained. Prior to this act, they had to give you a certain fair warning that they were going to look into your right to have citizenship. Now this is saying that they can come and detain you. So people who have spent their entire lives in the country, and 6 million people are facing that attack. So this is an absolutely huge attack on people's rights to asylum and rights to citizenship. And of course, we know it's taking part in a very toxic climate. And I think what we have to say is that it's down to every anti-racist to try to organise to resist every single racist attack that we see. So we have the Nationality and Borders Act. On top of that, we found out this year that we have this horrendous offshore detention policy, which went hand in hand with an attempt to say that they wanted to try these pushbacks. So Priti Patel wanted to send out boats to push people back in the channel. You can imagine the amount of people that are already making very treacherous journeys for a better life, are already dying in the channel because that's a very dangerous route. The idea that we would send out boats to disrupt that and send those people back. Why are we not sending out boats to take those people into our arms and bring them back to a safe space where they can live with their families? People will remember the image of Aylan Kurdi, the young child who died. This is sadly just one of many people who have died in the channel. That policy of pushbacks was actually defeated. The PCS civil service union in this country is leading up a number of legal challenges alongside Care for Cali campaign, and Stand Up to Racism has been a part of supporting protests around these. The PCS legal challenge in the courts defeated Patel's policy of pushbacks. So they had to get rid of that. But now what they're trying to do is the Rwanda policy. They've made a payment of £20 million to the Rwanda government. And, I think one of the things that we do have to say about the Rwanda policy is that, there's a whole question of human rights here with the regime in Rwanda. The Rwanda government has been accused of recruiting refugees to conduct armed operations in neighbouring countries. The lawyer who is currently has been in court this week leading the legal challenge, who's called Raza Hussein, had said that the policy was unlawful under the Human Rights Act and under common law. That asylum seekers removed to Rwanda will face a risk of violation of their rights to be free from torture and inhumane treatment. We all know the record of the current regime in Rwanda. That this is this is a government that the Human Rights Watch has said has a known track record of extrajudicial killings, suspicious deaths in custody, unlawful or arbitrary detention, torture, abusive prosecutions, and particularly targeting critics and dissidents. And so you think about the British government putting in this amount of funds at a time of a cost of living crisis to deport people to Rwanda, to these absolutely inhumane conditions. It's absolutely outrageous. And also one of the points that we want to make is that really, even on their own racist terms, even on their own terms of not giving a damn about people's human rights, the actual model of the Rwandan scheme is not really going to be very effective. And on their own terms, they're only going to process something like 1,000 refugees over a 5-year trial period. We obviously say that's 1,000 too many. We don't want a single person to have to be deported to Rwanda. And thanks to the mass protests that we held back in June, when the first flight was scheduled, and the legal challenges, so far, not one single refugee has been deported yet to Rwanda on a flight flying from Britain, because the movement here has come round, has protested and has stopped that first flight taking off. But the government are very keen to get that first flight to take off. And so the legal case that has taken place this week is about trying to determine whether the policy is lawful. So, you know, there's been a legal team from Care for Cali and PCS who've been battling that out in the courts. Outside the courts, we had 600 people on a work day, which we were pleased with the turnout. There's a huge level of anger and outrage about this policy. We also had protests taking place in over 20 towns and cities across Britain, and everybody was very pleased when they saw the picture come through from Denmark, who also took part in the protests. That was really, really brilliant to see. And we also trended again on Twitter. We ran a Twitter storm. We got everybody to share them holding up the poster "Stop Rwanda" with hashtag Stop Rwanda, and we got it to number 10 in UK tweets trends, which we were pleased with. But you know, we know that we've got a real fight on our hands here. Both Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak, who were the candidates inside the Tory party election to see who would be the next Prime Minister, were very, very quick to say, we will continue the Rwanda policy. We want to not only continue it, we want to extend it. Everybody was saying that in the Tory leadership election. And that's because the attack on the Rwanda policy isn't really about trying to respond to a refugee crisis. It's about trying to use the fact that people are seeking asylum and that people are in that desperate situation to whip up racism in this country, in Britain, and to divide people. Because this is a government that is absolutely desperate to divert attention from their failings over the COVID pandemic. The number of deaths, 140,000 people that died as a result of COVID needlessly, because this government, it was Boris Johnson who actually said the words, "Let the bodies pile high," who joked about shaking hands with people who had COVID. People can all remember how terrible lots of governments were at the beginning of the COVID pandemic, but the British government were particularly atrocious. They had illegal parties while people died. So while working class people in this country could not go and visit family members who were in hospital with COVID, could not see loved ones over Christmas and other festive breaks over the holidays, and while their relatives were dying, this government held parties in Downing Street and elsewhere. They want to cover up that. They want to cover up the cost of living crisis. They want to cover up the fact that while people are struggling to work out how they're going to pay their energy bills, which are all going to go up astronomically next month, the energy companies seem to be making record profits. This is all happening, and we're seeing an ongoing austerity measures where it's actually been reported that over 150,000 deaths have been caused by austerity and by cuts and by attacks to our welfare state over the last decade. This is the context that the government is trying to maintain some level of control, and they're doing that through racism and through trying to divide people. And we in Stand Up to Racism, in Care for Cali, the PCS union, and all the 13 trade unions that have backed their Stop Rwanda campaign and taken part in it are very clear that it is about divide and rule, and that it is about trying to whip up racism and to tell people on any given street it's not the government that is to blame, it's this refugee family that have moved into the house next to you, or these people that are trying to seek asylum by travelling in very difficult, dangerous circumstances to get to a place of safety. So it's interesting because we also have a strike wave beginning to develop in Britain at the moment, which I won't say too much about, but you can get a sense of it when the main campaign around this has the slogan, "Enough is enough." This is a government that is under immense pressure over, the crisis that it finds itself in. And so, we didn't expect for a minute that the next Prime Minister was going to stop pushing over the question of being racist towards refugees and migrants. And so we've been very active we're very proud that we work with a lot of the trade unions. We go out to the trade unions meetings, we get them all together, we organise with the trade unions. We have around 80 local groups. We organise inside local communities to respond to any racist attack. We organise inside colleges, anywhere where this kind of racist division that's pushed from the top is going to rear its ugly head. We want to have stand up to racism activists who are there, who are talking to people about, no, this racist policies are about dividing people. And so on Monday, it was a very spectacular display of a united campaign that brought together refugee rights organisations, Amnesty, NGOs. We had Jeremy Corbyn there. We had unions who are on strike. We had we had a lot of support, people like Gary Young, commentators. We've had a lot of celebrities sharing the poster on social media. And this, I think it's been in some ways, it's been a very difficult campaign because it's been a busy time. In other ways, it's been quite easy to get support for. People think that the policy is so terrible that it's really a matter of just getting out confidence about opposing it. We found is about giving people confidence to come out and be part of that protest. So anytime we have run street stalls, these kind of things, we found that people want to stop and get their picture taken. They want to sign up to the campaign. They want to come to their next local protest. So that is something that hopefully is useful to people trying to do the same in other countries. And yes, one of the things that has helped build the confidence is that we have already stopped the first flight, and they've not yet been able to have a single flight take off. We're very worried because once this case is concluded, if the judges don't find in the favour of the refugees, which is quite likely because they're not often on our side in these situations, then we're going to start facing a hard campaign of having to try and stop the flights again. There's been a pause in the flights. But we're confident, that in that time we have built up quite a strong campaign, and we just want to convince everybody to get involved in that, to reject the policies of the hostile environment. And another thing that I wanted to feed in from what's happening in Britain is that we've been very focused on the Stop Rwanda campaign. But the reason I talked about the Nationality and Borders Act at the beginning is because there's a much broader attack in the government trying to intensify a racist, hostile environment as a main policy of Britain, and they want to convince working class people living in Britain that this is the narrative that we have to accept. And so, already we had racist policy over borders. It was Theresa May, many Tory leaders ago, and we've seen so many of them who actually coined the phrase and was the architect of the hostile environment policy. But this, Johnson's cabinet and Truss's cabinet, I think, are going even further to the right, even further in their racist policies. And you can see that with the acts that they're bringing in and with the policies around Rwanda. But this has provoked a very big response. I'm from a place called Pollokshields in Glasgow. And I don't know if people have heard of that Pollokshields, or if people have heard of a street called Kenmure Street. Kenmure Street, which is the corner of the street I grew up on, in May 2021, a Home Office van from London, from Westminster, was sent on the instructions of Priti Patel to enact what we call a dawn raid. It's an immigration raid where they come to the house in the very, very early hours of the morning. It's a shock raid so that they try to minimise the response from the community or anyone's neighbours or supporters or any campaigns. And they try to just take people in the night and take them to detention centres. But when this happened, a very brave campaigner crawled underneath the van. So the van couldn't move. And then word started to spread around. Everybody was on their phones saying, get down to Kenmure Street. Everybody get down there right now. And when I got down there, I think there was around about 15 people there. But, you know, they were blocking the van. The van couldn't move because the person underneath the van. And everybody just hit their networks, you know, in Stand Up to Racism. We were just putting it out, telling everybody to come down, contacting all the unions and the people that we knew. And, you know, by mid-morning, there were hundreds around the van chanting, these are our neighbours, let them go. We had the First Minister of Scotland who came out and said that this shouldn't be happening, you know, because there was so much pressure from the protest. And, you know, we had an absolutely huge police operation. There were something like 27 police vans who came into the community. This was on Eid. So most of the community, there's a very big Muslim community in that area of Glasgow. Most of them were celebrating Eid in the middle of a lockdown, trying to do so. But it turned into a huge community event where people came out onto the streets and, you know, just refused to leave until our two neighbours were let outside of the van. And in the end, the police either had the choice of smashing up the protest or letting the neighbours go. So they were let go, and people will have probably seen the images. There were thousands there by that point. The streets were full of people, and we marched with the two people who had been detained in the van up to the mosque. The local mosque said, it's Eid, you know, we're having a celebration. We'll take them in. So it was just this fantastic day of solidarity, of unity, of the agency that we can all have as a movement in stopping these attacks. And it wasn't just once that we've had that happen. A year later, in Edinburgh, also in Scotland, they did the same thing. Thousands of people came out and protested and stopped an immigration raid. Then a few weeks later in Hackney in London, again, an immigration raid was stopped when people flooded onto the streets and protested and said that this wasn't acceptable. And then again, only a few months ago, I've missed one actually, in South London they did it as well. A few weeks later in a place called Peckham, they stopped another dawn raid. And then just last month or the month before in Manchester, again, a van to come to deport people, to detain them, was stopped. So we have this national level campaign to stop Rwanda that we're trying to get every big organisation and group on board with. But on the ground and in the local communities, we have also seen people just, you know, coming together and stopping these raids. And it's been so inspiring, because there's an awful lot to be very worried about at the moment in Britain and I'm sure in Denmark, with the levels of racism and the levels of attacks that people are facing. But there's also a lot to be confident about, I think, and I wanted to share some of those stories so that people could have a flavour of the sense that we can do this in Denmark. We can do this in all the places that we're organising. We just have to be persistent in our anti-racist campaigning. We have to try to reach out to as many people as we possibly can. We have to organise locally. We have to organise nationally, and internationally. We have to share our stories together. So, yeah, I think, you know, if you look at the wake of the Black Lives Matter movement globally, we might see a rise in racism, but we also have a lot of anti-racists who were behind that movement. And I think the trick is for us to organise. As Angela Davis said, it's not enough to be non-racist. We have to be anti-racist. We have to be active. We have to be going out to find that anti-racist majority and organising them and into campaigning. So I hope that you understood what I was saying. I'm sorry that I am not physically there, and I'm sorry that I don't speak Danish, but I hope you could get some of the sense of what's happening here in Britain. Thanks.